I think that one interesting question is what you think of the panel, or speakers, or the audience. What do you think of the view that national bibliographies do not necessarily have to be exhaustive? Actually, the guidelines say that you can be selective, you can even be representative, but what do you think about that?
I guess our philosophy has been that if it meets the criteria for legal deposit, which in Canada is 5 pages or more, so that's very small publications, that we've traditionally felt that it should be contained in the bibliography. On the other hand, as I was saying, we do make exclusions for certain kinds of materials with very little content, like books of crossword puzzles and coloring books that meet the criteria for legal deposit because there's a sentence at the bottom of each page of the coloring book, and we exclude those from the bibliography and always have. So certainly anything that minor online would be excluded. But I strongly suspect that once we get beyond the commercial ebooks, and we start looking at some of the self-published web documents that people try to give us on voluntary deposit, there we feel a little bit more need to be selective, because it's easy to write a PDF document and post it on your personal website that's 5 pages or more, and then you try to submit it in voluntary deposit, but do we really want the National Bibliography to include those materials? On the other hand, we would have included it if it had been printed, put in a little folder and mailed to us, so.
Hello. I think inevitably there's going to be a process of exclusion of one sort or another. I think the digital era makes that more challenging in a different range of ways, simply because it's so much easier to publish, and also the diversity of the range of different possibilities there are for publishing. As has been mentioned, different types of audio download at different types of bit rate. Same basic content, but just a different way of encoding that information. So I think one of the challenges is going to be attempting to trade off the need for a reasonably comprehensive representation of a national output against the ever-growing amount of material that's out there. And that's both in terms of time as well as format. As publishers increasingly begin to bring on stream material that they may have published in a physical format many, many years or even decades ago, simply assigning a new ISBN, getting some new cover art, and then outputting that in an EPUB format, say. In libraries, actually, in national libraries, it's another type of challenge, because it's another set of material that we would, in theory, need to collect by definition, because it's coming on stream now. It may have actually been originally created in the 30s or beyond. So I think there's going to have to be a lot of thought given to this type of process in order to ensure that we are managing to capture content as well as create a picture of what's going on in the national output. And that may include being comprehensive, perhaps more comprehensive for traditionally trade-published output, and then perhaps selective again for home-published or self-published output. I mean, I think when I was leaving, I was looking at some of the publishing figures in the UK, and one of the most popular publications that is available, I think, on the Kindle now was a self-published item originally. So, if we didn't include that kind of material, then, or at least the earliest edition or representation of that kind of material, then we wouldn't be necessarily capturing a national output. So I think it is a challenge, but it's something that we're going to have to attempt to deal with. I'd also say it's possibly an opportunity for national libraries in terms of when publishers are brought on stream to begin to deposit that material, then the fact is that as they bring some of this older material on stream that's still in copyright, we then do get the opportunity to begin to collect material which we wouldn't have been able to digitize ourselves from its hard copy form. So there are some possibilities of a silver lining in the cloud, as it were, in that particular instance.
Yes, Neil actually said what I wanted to say, but I would like to add that especially in small countries and in small languages, the role of the national bibliography is still in the future very important to show what kind of published outcome a nation has or had, and it doesn't disappear anyhow in the future, I believe.
I think if we work on a selective basis, it's important to give a clear statement on the selection criteria. As, for example, Hannah stated, if it's video, more than 15 minutes, not less than 15 minutes, then people know what we have. Or, yeah, I think it's important to be clear about the criteria.
I think it's very dangerous to have content criteria. You can have format criteria, like a certain number of characters, time, maybe certain kind of technical format. But if you have content criteria, it's always changing the picture of the actual output of publications. Even at this time, we see certain publications as not really important. In 100 years, they can give a good picture on how, what kind of problems the society dealt with, or what was going on at that time. On the other hand, I don't think it's possible to collect everything anymore, especially digital. This is Sisyphus work. We can try to get there, but I don't think we will ever reach the time where we say, okay, we got everything that's out there.
Hannah?
Well, I know that about the content, but in some ways I also feel that I think that in national bibliography we have two goals: the cultural heritage and the timely use of the national bibliography. And maybe the time has come in the years before with printed materials. Well, we go hand in hand, the two tasks of the national bibliography, and maybe we have to define something saying, well, this we do because we want to make the national bibliography timely, and this we do because we have to consider the cultural heritage. It's two different goals, I think, in this area.
I think we have a question from the audience.
Unni Knudsen, Norway. I have a question about access, because we all know that one of the Ferber user's tasks is to get hold of an item. And national bibliographies today do a lot of web crawling and detecting of electronic resources, and they end up in deposits somewhere. And access is restricted on many of those items. Some national libraries obviously has a tradition that it's only available on site for researchers. Other are online for or are available for the audience as such. But anyhow, access is restricted. So I was wondering, what the panel might think of this very strange situation where we collect and collect and collect, but we don't really give access. I know, of course, that this is a copyright issue, but I wonder, is anyone at the National Bibliographic Agency level doing anything with these restrictions?
Yeah, that's a difficult question, and it's a tricky question to answer. We would like to offer access to every digital material we collect, but if we do so, we break the law and we have the publishers that won't give us their material anymore. What we're trying to do is making contracts with the publishers and the people that give us their material so that we can offer access, and we have about a third of the material is possible to access from outside the library right now.
I think it's a particular challenge, and one that's actually increasing rather than decreasing, because of the fact that publishers have, in the case of UK electronic legal deposit, almost begun to kind of counter-attack to some degree by not only requiring quite restrictive legislation, enabling users only to be able to access the digital content within the reading rooms of the legal deposit libraries in the UK, but also challenging what we would think of as our potential right to be able to use the metadata that accompanies the material as well. Also, some of you may be aware of legal judgments, such as the Meltwater example, where particularly the press have been wanting to attempt to impose even greater restrictions on newspaper articles, and even attempting to get a kind of judicial support for copyrighting the titles of articles, so that you couldn't even reuse the title of a particular piece of journalism. So I think it's a particularly difficult time for libraries in giving access, but equally, I should say from a British Library's perspective, we are attempting to offer up as a national bibliographic agency the metadata that we are creating on behalf of the nation, increasingly under a CC0 license, as permissive a license as possible for reuse. We're also putting together something called an access and reuse working group within the library to look at content that is out of copyright, that is being digitized or has been digitized and can be offered up to the wider community for reuse in as permissive a way as possible. And equally challenging publishers or other organizations, entities that are attempting to restrict the right, as we would see it at libraries, to give access to users, researchers, to the content that has been produced, while still attempting to remain within the legislative framework that exists within our particular country. So it is a balancing act, one that is increasingly difficult, but again, through digital technologies, at least we have got ways of offering up more access to older materials that we have digitized or can negotiate with a certain number of publishers who are willing to let us offer up that information on their behalf.
In Finland, we do have two strategies to solve this problem, or some part of it. One is that we have a Legal Deposit Act, which is about, is it 14 years old or so, something like that. And now we like to make a revision, a new act. It will take some years, I believe, but that's one way. And the other way is that we are going, or we are negotiating all the time with several copyright organizations to solve one part of this access problem, but it is a slow way to get a solution. But anyway, we try.
Because we've been working on a voluntary deposit and don't yet have legal deposit legislation for online materials, we've been having to negotiate contracts individually with publishers. And this was one reason we started with material produced by government organizations, because there was no issue that was already public information, and therefore distributing it through our website or through the ministry's original website, there was no issue about that. But now, as we negotiate with commercial publishers, we've been having to give them a choice. You know, we'll allow people to access, but obviously not copy or save the files within the library, or there'll be an embargo period of a number of years. And some of them have been hesitant and even have sort of said, well, indefinite embargo, but we'll give it to you, and possibly at some point they'll go bankrupt and we'll be able to make it available. But we've still been feeling that it was valuable to get the material, because we feel if we get the material, at least we're preserving it. And if we don't get the material, and then in 10 years the publisher goes bankrupt and they can't make it available anymore, then nobody will have a copy. In terms of the issue of the metadata, we haven't been having the problems that Neil has been describing, because it's sort of a North American tradition that National Library metadata is reusable. We've never had any problems with that, and we certainly haven't had any publishers that have tried to make it impossible to cite their articles by preventing us from using the title. They'll just be plagiarized then.
I think the particular problem here is when we often talk to publishers directly, they don't see a problem with a lot of this. I think there may be a bit of peer pressure when you have a community together. And equally, I think one of the other issues in this is the tendency for all of the legal advisors, particularly copyright legal advisors, who advise us on these particular areas, to be very risk averse in these situations, to always suggest that the worst of all possibilities can happen. And because of that, everybody ends up being a little bit more cautious, perhaps, than they really and truly need to be. And so I think, again, there is a sensible compromise to be reached. And rather like Pat, we haven't yet got our final version of electronic legal deposit, but when it does emerge, it is likely that it's going to enable us to have individual negotiations with publishers on what it is that we can do with their content and their metadata. I think there may just have been a bit of scaremongering amongst the publishers as well themselves, who all think that librarians and libraries are going to be completely undermining their business models, making their content freely available to everybody in every format, in every way, and basically taking their business away. And we have to try and reassure them that that isn't going to be the case, and there's going to be a sensible compromise for everybody on this that enables access, but without destroying their business.
As far as the web archive is concerned, we are negotiating also for better legal conditions, because, of course, if you tell people we are archiving the Austrian web, but you have to come to us to see it, people will not come. So we have the problem that we have not enough users. We would like our resources to be used much more. But if you make people come on site, they will not come. That's the one side. I think it will take years before the law is changing again. And for the e-publication, books, journals, etc., we check the access rights at the time of the collections and make a contract with the publishers. And by and large, you can say that the commercial publishers, of course, want to restrictive access on site, and non-commercial publishers are happy to give free access to their resources.
More questions? Yes.
My name is Ragnar Steinarsdóttir. I come from the National Library of Iceland. One of the problems that we have is that we don't feel we're keeping up with the publication. Material that used to be available to us through legal deposit, like reports of all kinds, is just disappearing. So my question is this a problem for other national libraries, and how are they dealing with it? Do they feel that they are covering this material, and how much resources put into this? Do you feel you have enough resources, and do you have any clever ideas for us to how to deal with this?
I could say that in Denmark we also recognize that a lot of scientific reports they didn't get published in printed versions anymore, only online, and sometimes we have to make campaigns to be sure we get those kind of materials, but we don't get them as much as we did before. But sometimes we make strictly campaigns against some sites we know we must have some information we should have to register it for the National Bibliography.
I think we recognise the same kind of problem because we have had a voluntary scheme for some time, and under this currently, publishers do not have to deposit with us if they choose not to do so. And as an increasing number have perhaps brought out e-journal versions of their content and ceased publication of their printed journals, some publishers have actually made the conscious decision not to deposit those items with us until such time as new legislation comes in place. So we are aware there is a certain group of material which we are missing through the fact that publishers choose not to deposit in some instances. I think this is a challenge also for publishers themselves, or rather the organizations that have traditionally disseminated information about publications in the book trade, due to the fact that there are an increasing range of channels, platforms for publication. And what we have ended up doing, also to ensure that we are capturing some of the kind of hybrid publications, the kind of print-on-demand or other groups of material, is to begin to source data feeds from a range of different suppliers who also service the commercial book trade in the UK. That's, for example, Nielsen Book Data, a company called BDS, who are, in the latter case, also creating the data for our CIP program. The idea is really that we get data feeds in from as wide a range as possible, in addition to the channels by which we normally identify material for legal deposit, and deduplicate that information in order to attempt to be in a position to claim material that we might otherwise have lost. But even those organizations themselves concede that the challenge of electronic publication is something that even they are not entirely on top of, that even the book trade itself is not necessarily able to monitor the amount and type of electronic publication that's going on. So the work or the job for a national library is even harder in that type of circumstance. It's partly because people can create things on individual websites or disseminated things through the Kindle store on Amazon, which aren't necessarily constrained by national boundaries. But equally, as you say, the other challenge is research material and the increasing use of institutional repositories for research reports. We're hoping in the UK again that an increasing emphasis on open access to that information and those repositories will enable us to create a more structured harvesting approach for that material. But it is a challenging time, and I think it's a challenging time for everyone in that situation.